as well. I've seen a lot of these things as well in the UK. You get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid, I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Hello everyone and welcome back to The Happening. My name is Jorge Shaft and it's been quite interesting so far this episode. Bit of a change in format. I decided to go from away from the UK stories first and then, slowly been reeling it back to bring it home. I guess before I actually do bring it home, I thought, I should probably mention one little small story. I'm not going to talk about it because it's not a main subject, but the story was how Sierra Leone just agreed to a deal with China to build this massive port in Sierra Leone in an area that used to be basically right now it's this small kind of fishing town kind of place, and China's kind of agreed to sort of build this huge port. And I was going to talk about here's proof of the Belt and Road Initiative working, because it's going to be this great investment and people are going to love them for it. But let's move on from that and talk about the UK. There's a story that I have got preserved, which, how should I put this? It's going to be the hook into discussing something in greater depth. And it was that schools are not being repaired. It was sort of originally out by this school headmaster. I can't actually find the article now, which is annoying. I believe it was in The Guardian, but I'm not going to waste my time live on air kind of all looking for it. And it was just a story of this headmaster going hey, by the way, there are schools which have problems with leaks and damaged roofs, and some of the buildings are in kind of old rickety shape, and they need investment. They need money to be poured in to fix all these kind of old schools which are breaking down. One of those obviously that's a good thing to do. Education is of supreme importance, not just for the prosperity of the country, but also for life prospects of literally every child in that nation. Just a small little thing, I assure you. But it made me think, because you see, yes, I agree that schools have got leaky roofs, needs to be fixed. And if the money's not there, make it be there. We can do that. But it then made me think of okay, but why have they been sort of allowed to get to that state? And then one of the things that immediately came to mind was, the past year has been the plague year, hasn't it? I am talking to you today from the white void that is my flat, instead of from the awesome, amazing studio, in part because of the pandemic. And that's been quite a common thing that's been sort of circulating through a lot of sectors. People not going into work because they're working from home or working outside in the park. And then it really, really caught my mind when I saw a story in The Guardian today that, well, it says this. I'm utterly sick of it. UK workers on the return of the commute. All right. As September approaches, employers are increasingly asking workers to come in, with many offices adopting hybrid systems after months of working from home, prompting mixed emotions. Commuting can be both expensive and polluting. UK workers pay more of their salary in commuting costs than their EU counterparts, and, before the pandemic, 2/3 of people travelled to work by car. But despite the costs, which also include time, some value commute for separating their work and home lives. And then the first person literally says, I can't keep doing this commute. And there's this London guy talking about how he takes this like ridiculous marathon odyssey, wakes up at like 5 a.m. to hop into the sort of a bunch of different tubes to reach his work. And I have had the thought of there's been a couple of stories that are like this. As the sort of commute, is kind of like being forced to reassert itself, there's been other sort of things coming out with it as well, especially the school run. And there's an article that I've also got kept somewhere that was in the sort of The Voice, talking about, hey, by the way, a lot of the sort of people that I'm sort of working with kind of don't want to go back to the classroom. In fact, in this article, they talk about they want to actually study outside or even do what they call walking classes, which are not a new thing. In fact, famously, actually, I don't know how famously, but like famously, in ancient Greece, Aristotle used to teach outside. He had like his academy, but it was but like the academy was just like a grove of trees, and like the students would all go, and they'd study their philosophy and do all that, learn about the world in and amongst all these trees. Walking classes have also been this thing that's been sort of, and walking meetings as well, been this thing that's been, coming back into the fore, where it's like, well, people kind of like walking. It's kind of good for the brain. It opens like more what they call sort of divergent thinking. It makes people be more creative, be more sort of like self-assured. It reduces like the sort of like, in the box, rules-based kind of thinking, which are like really important in the modern world because creative energy, is something required in basically every sector nowadays to like improve things. So why wouldn't we keep, adopt that more? Why should we return to a normal from the past before the pandemic, which frankly had a bunch of disadvantages and which people didn't like? Like, honestly, who, like pre-pandemic, genuinely liked their commute? Don't get me wrong, I'm sure you can find them, but it's not that many people. Why would you? Well, for most people, the commute is driving by car. As I read in the article, it's 2/3 of people. That's time where you're just like in your little metal box, focused on the road. Maybe you're listening to a podcast, like, okay, that's nice. You can also listen to a podcast on the train or at home. And in fact, you'll probably enjoy listening to it more at home, because it's your own space. It's going to be quieter. There's going to be sort of less kind of like distractions. You can listen to it in comfort. So I'm kind of wondering, what's the what's the big rush? What's with the big hurry? Sort of rush people back into the physical spaces, especially if these physical spaces, like with the schools in this first story, are in bad condition. If they need to be repaired, like who wants to go study in a classroom with a leaky roof when you could also learn the exact same things from the comfort of your home? I'm sure there are some people, they go like, yeah, I prefer like seeing my classmates in person, which I very much sympathize with. And that's a feeling I've very, very strongly been feeling this past year during the plague year. Because surprise, I actually kind of like talking to people. I know, right? I didn't know that myself, but turns out I do. But you can't fault someone for also thinking, yeah, but I'm learning the same things from great comfort. And I don't need to travel this big, long, stressful commute to then, I guess, study in a room that needed repairs for like 10 years now. I don't know where to sort of conclude with that, to be honest. This is one of those segments where I ultimately just think, come up to your own conclusions. But it's something that is on my mind, and it's something that I really sort of I'm thinking about and curious about. I'd like to learn more because a lot of this, the kind of like the neuroscience, surprisingly, and this is something that caught my attention this week as well, was that surprisingly, actually, the neuroscience behind like what happens to a person when they're just like walking, when they're just like wandering, a lot of it's actually really quite unknown, and a lot of research is still needed to kind of figure out like, okay, why does the brain do this when you go for a stroll? Which you would have thought would have been like the first thing we'd go and look up, but apparently not. And since the benefits seem to see like benefits, why don't we incorporate it more? And sure, you could say like, oh, Northern European weather is trash, granted. But then that's why we invented anoraks and coats. As I said, I don't know where to conclude with this. But it's something that has really caught my attention. It made me think. And also made me realize, like, yeah, the government needs to spend, of course, money on fixing schools because having schools be in a state of disrepair is utterly unacceptable. What do you think? Let me know in the comments of the Facebook live stream. I always make a point of checking them out, just like I did today, where I was talking to James, the person who had commented while talking about Afghanistan. But in the meantime, you know what exists out there, out beyond these walls? There's this really horrifying thing. I know, right? It's terrible. It's called other people. I'm going to, even more horrifyingly, let those other people say something too. I'll catch you all again very, very soon.
We've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? Because in a public company where the stock is traded openly on the stock exchange, the value of that stock